Thank you, Ari. Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to discuss TX-ray. It's essentially a system that tries to identify the root cause and then develop a runnable exploit reproduction for live blockchain attacks. And everything really just from a single transaction hash. No additional data. OK, maybe the chain ID, but that's it. So this work, we essentially motivated through the post-mortem lag. Right? We understand that attacks, they land in seconds. The majority of the attacks that are smart contract-based are atomic, meaning they execute within a single transaction. But understanding the reason behind it, the logic, really takes hours. And I don't think anybody here wants to be woken up in the middle of the night and be told, we may have just lost a few $1 million. Can you please wake up? Analyze these blockchain transaction traces, look what happened, and identify whether we can recover any of these funds, right? And whether any of our other protocols are affected by it, whether any of our forks on other chains are affected by it, and whether any other similar protocols may also be affected by it, right? So that's kind of like almost like the worst case scenario when you're being woken up at night. And yet this is really somehow the industry practice at the moment, where collectively, I think over the last 5 years, roughly $16 billion in losses occurred in DeFi. So one concrete example that we've actually looked at in November last year was the balancer hack. About $90 million were stolen rather rapidly in the first attack wave. A few minutes after, you could see on Twitter, Twitter alerts, essentially, oh, there may be an attack at Balancer. You may want to look at this transaction, etc. And actually, the earliest analysis there blamed access control. But it turned out, almost 3 hours after the initial attack transaction, that no, there was not access control. The real cause was derived by hand, and apparently it was some rounding error in a pool invariant math. So something that was not that common at the time, and something that took experts quite a while to be likely woken up, and then identifying the issue. So for these 164 minutes, which is a long time, right? Structurally identical deployments, they stayed exposed. So you could have probably just triggered an LLM asking, OK, here there's this exploit. Are there any other protocols that may be affected too? So you have 164 minutes to get some inference and craft an exploit for these other protocols, while wrong explanations actually circulated, right? And I would even say it goes further beyond structurally identical deployments. Similar deployments may be vulnerable, etc. So it's a real issue, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if attackers are doing exactly that already, right? So I don't think that's a hypothetical that we are discussing here. OK, so according to our data, and that's at least what we are seeing, right? The loss distribution looks roughly as such. So most incidents are small, and that's actually a problem. Because if the incidents are too small, then you don't want to put on a high-skilled team to analyze the postmortems, right? Because they cost so much. It's just not economically rational to do a postmortem for every attack that's maybe less than $30,000. So we have about 374 incidents that are $100,000. 1% of the dollars, they're actually so the majority of the incidents are just too small, essentially, to be analyzed. And a few incidents are really high-priced. Right? So the distribution is extremely skewed. What about the location of the incidents? So where are they happening? Again, our data is actually maybe slightly biased because we look at transaction hashes of attacks that are being discussed on social media, in particular X. So it could be that other chains are not being discussed, for example, on X. So I just a word of caution that our data may be slightly biased here. But what we see is that the volume is actually on BNB, but the money is on Ethereum. So the dollar share is roughly 20% on BNB, while BNB has over 50% of the incident numbers, right? Then the other chains, they're kind of like minor, but I think it's an interesting distribution to observe. So on Ethereum, I suppose you can really hire an analyst team, and the more minutes you save when analyzing an exploit, the more likely you're actually able to save a few millions on either your other forked protocols or other people's protocols that are similar to yours, right? All right, so what about the time distribution? So here on the x-axis, you have quarters over the last few years. And so the gray bars are essentially what we tried to reconstruct based on public data, based on public reports. And our system is in production since 2026. So that's why that's essentially the red bars, right? So that's where we try to do this ongoing in production. So far in the first half of 2026, we found 179 incidents, which is more than in 2025. But again, we are maybe slightly biased because we didn't do like a very deep backfilling of historical data. We're really focusing on current exploits, on current data here, right? I still believe this is actually only the tip of the iceberg. There's probably much more out there, right? So we're still not seeing everything that's happening. So again, over time, but now what's the dollar amount, right? Did we see like a change in terms of like median exploit size? And we do not really see a change on the median amount at least, right? So you can see 2026 is about 50K, and the same through 2022. The medians are a little bit higher if you notice maybe in 2020 and 2021. And that's just because if you look at the previous plot here, there are just fewer incidents that we have at least, right? So that's why the median may be a bit skewed. But roughly speaking, we see a similar amount in terms of like median exploits. In Q4 of 2025, you see 131 million. That corresponds to the balancer hack, right? So that's that actually spiked that particular quarter. 90 million was taken quickly, 30 million were taken in the few hours that followed. And this is the window of opportunity where systems like this could help to mitigate the losses, right? And that's why we're working on this. Okay, I've spoken a lot about numbers and so on, but what kind of attacks are we actually looking at? We call them anyone can take opportunities. It's similar to an MEV opportunity. There are slight technical differences, but essentially it's an opportunity that really anyone can take, meaning there's no private key that you need to steal, there's no privileged access, there is no private order flow, right? It's literally public data only. You can write that exploit, you can test it yourself. So it's fully essentially tested and based on public data. What is out of scope is, for example, phishing attacks, address poisoning, key compromise, etc. Actually, I would like to have a shout out to Toxin Tracker, a tagger at CMU. They are, for example, looking at address poisoning and doing a great job with that, right? So obviously in DeFi security, there are a lot of different angles on how to avoid losses. We are, in this talk at least, focusing on anyone can take opportunities. All right, so what about the technical side of TX-Ray? Well, it's actually a rather standard, I would say by now, agentic system. It's one orchestrator and then 6 specialized agents. We have 2 dimensions to the problem. One dimension is the root cause analysis, essentially what caused the exploit, right? Well, what is the flow? And here we have 3 underlying components. So for example, we look at on-chain data. So we must have access to an archive node. We must have access to the trace of a particular transaction. So all the execution details of the EVM trace here in this particular example. Then we have a specialist that analyzes this, and we have a challenger, a so-called challenger, that then challenges a report written by the root cause analyzer. I would say this is somewhat of a human heuristic, this design. There may be other designs that work better, that are more cost efficient. But that's at least what we tried, what seemed to work for our case so far. The other dimension is the POC generation. So proof of concept generation, meaning self-contained foundry code that you can execute on a given forked blockchain state, assuming no privileged access, right? Assuming no access to any attacker contracts, etc. So it's essentially a foundry forge test on that forked chain state. So what's important is that every claim that the root code analyzer does must survive a challenger, right? This is the third component in the first dimension of TX-ray. So we collect data, for example, from Etherscan and on-chain data. Then we analyze the data. We try to write a report of what is the root cause, what kind of approvals do you need, how are funds extracted. And then at the end, this is fed into the challenger, which then will say, okay, you can go and give this to the POC generator, or no, you need to collect more data or be more explicit. So a few reasons actually that the challenger rejected root cause proposals are here shown on the right side. So for example, speculative language, unknown content. So every address, for example, right, in the POC, in the proof of concept that we derive, every address needs to have a label. It needs to have a reason to exist in the POC. It needs to be justified. So if it's not, it should be rejected. So these are just some examples of why, for example, the challenger agent is pushing back on a particular root cause analysis. And then regarding the POC generation, the root cause actually is really just a test that we create, that we actually generate on the fly. So for example, we have victim contracts, we have asset addresses, we have actually, quite important, we have two constraints, so hard and soft constraints. In particular, for example, the soft constraints would be if the economic direction needs to be, like how much the POC is making should be roughly aligned with the original attack, right? So we have, it's not merely positive, it needs to be somewhat in the ballpark figure of the original attack. What's actually interesting here is you could even let the agents optimize attacks. We have written papers on that before. A lot of DeFi attacks are actually suboptimal. So you can, in many cases, do backrunning arbitrage and extract higher values, which you could actually plug in here really nicely. So regarding hard constraints, we do not allow that the POC has privileged access, such as ownership changes, etc. Right? So we come from the stance that the POC has to be essentially just a neutral third party that has no insider information or any private key access. We also try to have as little as possible of like magic constants in the POCs. I guess that's more like of a soft constraint. And we have a few things that the POC must not contain at all. I think the one that I really enjoy or believe it's the most important is the attacker deployed helper contract. So whenever attackers are doing DeFi attacks, typically they deploy a helper contract. We could just call that one and call this our POC, right? But that wouldn't be a self-contained fair POC, at least in our view. So what we attempt to not have in the POC is this attacker helper contract, but to really derive the underlying root cause from first principles instead. So what's the result? Well, end to end, we try to reproduce, this is like manually verified on only a subset of the dataset that we have. So on 114, anyone can take incidents. We found that TX-Ray works end to end on 105. So that's roughly 92% success, right? The reason that it failed is mostly like it basically couldn't find the post-mortem, the root cause, right? This is in many cases one of the main issues that we found. But 92% for a fully automated system is already a very helpful data point, I believe. Right? And what about the POC quality? So we have, for example, there's a very famous and really helpful data set out there called DeFi Hack Labs. This is a community-driven data set where anyone can do a pull request and submit a POC for a given DeFi attack. And so we have tried to benchmark against DeFi hack labs according to 6 metrics that we have defined here, for example. You will find them also in the paper. I think I actually would like to focus maybe on the 4th one, asserts that the exploit worked. It may be a small thing, but we believe you should have, at the end of the POC, you should have an assert. Okay, this POC made $100,000, right? So that's a simple assert at the end of the POC that will just help with rigor and quality of the POC. We found that very few of the public POCs have this kind of assert. We've also seen that there are actually very few that have no exploit-specific constants. Even in our case, 50% of our POCs still have exploit-specific constants, some magic numbers essentially that are required for the POC to work. Right? Ideally, any constant should be derived somewhat through some optimization function or through some initial balance that is provided. Right? That would be the ideal POC. We are also not perfect, of course. That's essentially the comparison to open source POCs. And we also did in the paper you will find we did a live deployment. So this was actually before we went fully into production in 2026. And what we did is we ingested transaction hashes from Twitter. Then we checked whether whether the system can find the root cause. So that actually worked for 17 out of 20. 4 were actually anyone can take transactions. So we filtered them earlier, right? So and then from the 17 that worked, everything 100% were then converted into an executable POC. So that's quite interesting. So it means analyzing the root cause is harder than writing the POC, which makes sense, right? If I tell you, oh, the root cause is an invariant math issue in that pool, then you have a very strong direction into which to look, and you're probably gonna write the POC just fine, right? If I tell you it's an access control issue, while it's not, you're probably gonna fail, right? So it's really the root cause analysis is the hardest part of this job here. What about the time? I think the timing here, you will see it's actually quite slow. From alert to POC end to end, it's almost an hour. This can be the speed can be increased substantially if you're willing to increase the costs of inference, right? So it's just a cost question. So I think 60 minutes is slow, but it's fine if the costs are a matter. And speaking of costs, the median API cost for the paper at least that we've paid was about $4.4, which I think is great. $4.4 will allow us to analyze and to get postmortems for all the incidents that are out there. Right? Now it makes sense. You can actually run this automation. You don't need to invest like expensive engineering resources for the big tail of DeFi incidents. Right? And it could be that some of these like long tail incidents may even occur in bigger protocols, and then you can save these funds there. Right? So I think that's a really, really positive sign for DeFi security. So this is in production at clarahacks.com. We have over 600 incidents that are cataloged there. It supports 14 chains. We also backfilled from a variety of sources like DeFi Hack Labs, DeFi Llama, etc. And that's available today, right? So people essentially try to get information about the latest hacks there. But what really comes next, right? So as a team collectively, we're actually number 1 on HackerOne. We have found over 140 CVEs and $125,000 in bounties. And we believe this TX-ray is really just the beginning or a piece of a bigger puzzle. And it's really about an autoimmune system for software where when you observe an attack, you want to see how similar is that attack to potentially other code that may be vulnerable, whether it's EVM, blockchain, web, whatever. Then you want to quantify, is my threat surface changing? How am I affected? If I am affected, you create a validated POC, then you create a patch, then you verify the patch. And the wheel continues, right? So I hope in the security field we're really moving towards a more real-time kind of autoimmune system in general, and I see TX-ray really as being a piece of this puzzle. So what to take away from today? The post-mortem bottleneck is automatable, right? I think the industry is actually quite mature on the incident detection, but the post-mortem hasn't been tackled that much yet. There wasn't that much attention until recently. So I think this is really automatable, which is great. 92% success rate in the paper. And validation is really the product. So you need to validate, right, if you find a POC. We are running in production. You can also check out Clara.coms or Clara Hacks, the Twitter bot. There's actually just tweeting about the post-mortem live. This is fully automated, also disclosed AI bot. It may hallucinate, of course, at times, but if I'm honest, we're seeing less and less hallucinations at all. So thank you so much. Any questions?
Any questions for the speaker?
Is the classification susceptible to prompt injection? Is the classification susceptible to prompt injection?
Oh, right. We did not, the honest answer is so the question maybe is the classification susceptible to prompt injection? So we did not test specifically against prompt injection. That's an honest answer because it's actually quite some work, right, to test. However, I would say the validation, like the POC validation, which is a forge test on a chain fork of the chain, helps to eradicate false positives or any let's say, unprecise POCs, right? So it's a machine checkable proof that you can extract value and how much.
But to proceed to the proof of concept generation stage, you need to classify this as a bug. So my concern is maybe an attacker in the metadata of their transaction, they put something that confuses the model.
That's a good point. So you're suggesting that the TX-ray system it works on 2 dimensions, right? The root cause classification, then the POC generation. So prompt injection may actually tip off the first part. And you're totally right. I think that's definitely the case. From my practical experience, qualitative experience, I don't have numbers to give you. Prompt injection gets harder the more smarter models you use. But obviously, that's not a very scientific defense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the model as it currently works, or not the model, but rather the harness as it currently works, be able to deal with multi-stage attacks where the attacker first, I don't know, makes something, enter a time lock, and then 24 hours later they can perform the next step of the attack or that kind of thing? Is that viable, or would that be filtered out?
That would definitely be possible. It may be a bit more expensive operational-wise. I'm not sure if we actually evaluated that. Lee in the back is actually the lead senior author on this paper. Did we evaluate that? Great. Cool. Thanks a lot. Right.
Let's thank our speaker again.
Thank you.